Have you ever been in this situation? Blake paid all the family bills while his father Tony pretended to be looking for work. Little did he know that he was not only supporting an unemployed man, but also financing a scam. One day, Blake walked into the yard and saw a brand new motorcycle, a gift from his father to his younger brother, Emilio. Where did the money come from? It was the $10,000 inheritance his grandmother left to Blake, the only person who had ever been by her side until the end of her life. Blake was not the son. He was just a guardian, someone who was used to letting his father and younger brother live an irresponsible life. While Blake worked from morning to night, paying the electricity, water, and rent, his father spent his days in his pajamas, surfing TikTok, and investing in Emilio's future. But it didn't stop there. As Blake begins to dig deeper, he discovers that his entire family knows and is complicit. And what happens next? It tears families apart and pushes things over the edge. Yaris, stay tuned. This story is just beginning. Blake never thought that paying the bills would make him his family's walking wallet. For 3 years, he lived frugally, working hard, scraping together enough money to pay for electricity, water, internet, and even family parties. Meanwhile, Tony, his father, just lay on the couch still in his 2021 pajamas, lying about looking for a job. Every time Tony said he needed gas money for a job interview, Blake sent money. Every time he said he needed some money to buy clothes for a job interview, Blake pulled out his wallet. He never questioned it, until the day he drove into the driveway and saw a brand new motorcycle parked right in front. Blake thought it was a gift for him, but no, it was a gift for his younger brother Emilio. And the worst part, the motorbike was paid for with the only inheritance Blake's grandmother left him. At that moment, Blake realized a bitter truth in this family. He was not a son. He was a mobile wallet. And what happened next would tear his family apart, once and for all. Blake was 23 years old, not growing up poor, but always lacking the most important things: fairness, recognition, and above all, true love. His parents divorced when he was 10. His mother ran away with another man, leaving Blake and his younger brother Emilio in the care of Tony, a man who considered himself a great father, but in reality Tony was just blaming the world for his own failures. Tony used to be a mechanical engineer, a stable job, with a salary that was just enough to live on. But then the pandemic hit and Tony lost his job. Since then, Tony has been a lazy, unemployed man. Every day he lies on the couch watching Netflix, TikTok, and complaining it's like an endless loop. Whenever his friends ask, Tony always says he applies everywhere. But Blake has never seen him leave the house in a pressed shirt. Blake is different. He started working at 16, waiting tables, working nights, and then self-studying to get a job in tech. He paid for rent, tuition, and even the credit card debt that Tony secretly kept in a kitchen drawer. And Emilio was the ideal Tony had always wanted: handsome, likable, athletic, but never having to sacrifice anything for his family. Blake was the opposite. He worked quietly, sacrificed, and always believed that if he contributed enough one day, his father would see his true worth. But that day never came, and that motorbike was a real slap in the face. Blake never thought that quietly paying the bills would make his family see him as a backup, a walking wallet. For nearly 2 years, Tony, their 50-year-old father, a former mechanical engineer, had lived with his 2 sons in a small house on the outskirts of Fresno. But after the pandemic, he lost his job and kept saying he was actively looking for work. But what was the reality? He spent his days scrolling through TikTok, wearing faded sweats and asking Blake to send him money to fill up the car for interviews. At first, Blake didn't suspect anything. He thought the pandemic was a huge blow to his father. He paid for the electric bill, the water bill, the groceries, even the Netflix subscription his dad used to watch old football games. Blake's younger brother Emilio was 19 at the time, a freshman at community college. Emilio didn't contribute anything, just smiled whenever Tony asked for money. Then one afternoon in April, after Blake got off work, the unthinkable happened. There was a brand new motorcycle in front of the house, hand-sewn black leather, the license plate still unattached. Emilio was polishing it, beaming as if he had just won the lottery. When he saw Blake, he waved. "Cool. Right, Dad? Bought it for you." Blake stiffened. What Tony emerged from the house, a beer in his hand, grinning smugly. The kid needs motivation. He got into Cal State. He deserves it. Our family should be proud. Blake stood there stunned. "Where did that money come from?" Tony laughed. "Of course it was family money. Your mother? No, your grandmother left some. I used it to invest in someone with a future. But that money, is mine. It's ours, Blake Tony interrupted. You think I'm going to let you keep it for yourself? You should be grateful that you're still here. Blake clenched his fists, disbelieving. So, in their eyes, he was just a spare, a walking wallet. Emilio was still smiling, not even looking at his brother. Don't you have any plans? I need my bike to get to school. You should be happy for me. And right then, Blake knew. He wasn't really part of this family, just an outsider, a walking wallet without any respect. The motorbike wasn't a gift, it was a slap in the face. Blake couldn't sleep that night. The sound of the motorbike engine echoing from the entrance was a blatant reminder your hard work was now someone else's spoils. He lay in his room staring at the moldy ceiling, trying to shake off the feeling of betrayal. But it wasn't the sound of the exhaust that woke him in the middle of the night. It was a text message from a relative, Aunt Maria Tony's older sister. Your dad said he was going to use your grandmother's money to invest in Emilio before Chinese New Year. Didn't you know? Blake sat up straight. Before Chinese New Year. His grandmother's inheritance had only been dispersed 3 weeks ago. If his dad had planned it all, that meant all those requests for gas for interviews, money for resumes, train tickets to job fairs were lies. He scrolled through his phone, checking the transfer history. In just 3 months, he'd sent his dad nearly $2,700, nearly 3 times the family's operating expenses, for the same period. He'd seen no receipts, no responses from any company. Every time he asked, Tony sighed. These are all fake interviews, a waste of time. A quiet rage began to rise, not at the money, but at the breach of trust. The next morning, Blake walked into the kitchen and found Tony sitting at the table eating toast and watching comedy clips. Emilio was still wearing his leather jacket, licking his lips as he stared out the window at his new bike. Dad, Blake began, his voice calm and cool. You were planning on using my money for Emilio from the start, weren't you? Tony shrugged, not even trying to hide it. I don't have a plan. Emilio does. Who gets the investment? So what do you call all the times you borrowed money from me? Tony frowned. It was keeping the family together. You think I screwed you? Blake scoffed. No, I know you screwed me. Emilio interjected, smug and unconcerned. Come on, brother. Don't you know everyone knows? The whole family said you'd never have the guts to ask for it back. Dad just did the right thing. What was the right thing? Blake turned away, his heart heavy. Only one question echoed in his mind. How long have I been playing the fool? It's been a long time. It wasn't just the bike. It was Emilio's graduation party funded by the $10,000 his grandmother had left to the only person in the family who would be there for her until the end. They called it family money. They called Blake the walking wallet. They didn't think he would fight back. But they had forgotten one important thing. Blake paid for the internet, the electricity, the rent. Everything was in his name. They mistook his silence for weakness. But that silence was about to end. Blake started the day by opening his laptop and launching a spreadsheet. His hands were shaking slightly, but his eyes were razor sharp. Last night, after hearing what Tony and Emilio had said, he knew he couldn't pretend anymore. If they thought he was a good-natured fool now, he would show them a fool who could keep track of every last penny spent. The screen lit up with a list of dozens of transactions, Venmo, Zelle, Cash App, all sent to Tony's account. Blake checked each payment against old messages. $60 for gas to go to an interview, $35 for a resume, $200 for a train ticket to San Jose. But all those days, Tony was home. Blake remembered it clearly. Blake checked the cameras in the house. Then Blake turned to check his email. Any confirmations of job applications in the past few months? Not a single one. His browser history. Nothing but TikTok videos, YouTube searches, and motorcycle forums. Next, he opened the lease. The only name on it, Blake Thompson. Electricity, water, internet, all in his name. Emilio bragged about paying for Netflix, but in reality, he'd been using Blake's account for the past year. Blake carefully downloaded everything, copies of the transactions, digital utility bills, emails, even a screenshot from the hallway camera that showed Tony sprawled out on the couch the day he claimed to be interviewing. He created a new folder, receipts just in case, set a password, emailed a copy to his backup email, another copy to the legal counsel at the tech company he worked for. Mid-afternoon, right after Emilio rode off on his motorcycle, Blake stood up. He walked into the kitchen, holding a stack of papers. Tony was making grilled cheese. He looked up, raising an eyebrow. Do you know what this is? Blake asked, placing the stack on the table. Tony glanced down and frowned. Again, are you auditing the family now? Not the family, Blake said. This is a lie. Tony laughed, but his eyes blinked faster. Here, Blake pointed at the paper, are all the transactions I sent you. 2 7:30 tours for 3 months, along with the camera logs showing you were home the entire time, plus a bank statement showing $10,000 from Grandma was withdrawn shortly after it was deposited. Tony blanched. I'm not saying you stole it, Blake continued, but the bank could have, especially since the account is in both our names. Don't threaten me, Tony snapped. You wouldn't dare. Guess I don't dare, Blake said coldly. The kitchen was silent. The only sound was the scorching of toast. Tony looked at his son, not the obedient boy he had once controlled, but a man without fear in his eyes. So what do you want now? Tony said. Blake looked at him. I want you to know that your days of being a silent, resigned person are over. I'm not the guy who pays without asking why anymore. He turned and walked away. He paused. Oh, and one more thing starting today. The Wi-Fi is cut off. Netflix, Hulu. Spotify, I canceled them. Next month's rent, I'm not paying. Tony stood still. Blake turned and said one last thing. If you want to invest in the future, then you have to put your own money in. I'm not putting my money in anymore. And he slammed the door shut behind him, a sharp, resounding slam, like a court judgment. Blake had been silent long enough, and now he decided he wouldn't be silent anymore. He started by printing out each transfer form, checking it against the household bills. Every expense, Wi-Fi, electricity, trash, water, groceries, gas was in his name. He took a picture of everything, saved it to a folder on Google Drive, and sent himself the link twice just in case someone tried to erase the evidence. Then he emailed the rental company. I'm the one paying the rent. All the contracts are in my name. I'm officially terminating the lease at the end of the month. The landlord was stunned. She said Tony had always acted like he was the head of the household, just happened to pay with his son's bank account. She promised to send Tony a termination notice within the week. Blake then returned home to chaos. Emilio, check. For me, why is Netflix asking for a password again? TikTok isn't working. It must be the Wi-Fi. Blake calmly walked past them and said, emotionless, I'm cutting off all services. From now on, it's up to whoever pays. Tony blushed with anger and shouted, What the hell do you think you're doing? Blake placed the file on the table in front of his father. Everything you and Emilio are using is mine, from the rent to the food in the fridge. I don't have any money to support this family anymore. Tony gritted his teeth. So, you're really leaving? Are you trying to destroy this family? Family? Blake shook his head. What kind of family uses Grandma's funeral money to buy toys for the golden boy and tells the other boy that he was a mistake? Emilio walked out of the room, his expression stern. I won't do anything. I'll be back like I always do, Tony shouted from the bedroom. You want to burn everything down, don't you? No, Blake stood up. I just want to get away from things that weren't mine in the first place. That afternoon, Blake got into the car with a suitcase and a folder full of truths. For the first time in his life, he left without an apology or explanation, and his recklessness began to show. 3 days after Blake left, an urgent call came from Aunt Maria, who said he collapsed in the bathroom. The doctor said it was a concussion, because the bank said his account was frozen and he went into shock and passed out. Blake said nothing. In his mind, he remembered Tony screaming at him, calling him useless. Part of him wanted to go back, but the other part remembered every bill, every fake loan request, every insult. His phone rang constantly, messages from family, old friends, even people who had never cared about him before. A new message from Maria popped up. If you don't come back, everything will fall apart. Blake closed his laptop. He looked around the small apartment he'd just rented, the first place he'd ever felt truly in control. No one was bossing him around. No one had called him invisible. That night, Emilio sent a voicemail. His voice was choked up. You betrayed your own blood. Dad's in the hospital, and you just walked away like nothing happened. Blake listened. All of it. Not a word. Not deleted. Then he pulled out the photos, the receipts, the fake excuses for money, the bank statements, everything that proved he was the one who kept the house intact. He responded to Emilio with a single text. Blood is no excuse to take advantage of someone. Family is about respecting each other, not turning someone into a living ATM. No one answered. They didn't need to. Their old house was now a war zone. Emilio locked himself in his room. Tony lay in his hospital bed. The people who had cheered at the inheritance-funded parties were texting in panic. Blake stepped out onto his apartment balcony and took a deep breath of the early winter air. He didn't feel happy. He didn't feel victorious. He felt relieved. For the first time in years, he was no longer a shadow in his own family. And for the first time, he didn't feel guilty about it. Blake returned to his old house on a dark gray afternoon just to gather the last of his belongings. He unlocked the door with a key and stepped into a space that was thick with a strange heaviness. There was no laughter, no music, just the thick silence of a place that had once dared to call itself family. Emilio sat at the foot of the stairs, his head buried in his pillows. His once contented face was now one of panic and confusion. He didn't say a word as Blake passed. He just looked up with red eyes, as if waiting for forgiveness. But Blake didn't stop. There was no more anger and nothing more to say. Someone who has never respected you has no right to demand an explanation. Blake went upstairs, closed the door, and began packing up his belongings. A Bluetooth speaker, a few books, a picture of his grandmother. Each one was a part of the years he had spent trying to prove himself worthy, even though no one in that house had ever actually seen it. Just as he placed the last frame in the cardboard box, his phone rang. Unknown number. He picked up. Tony's voice rang out hoarse as if he'd just had a heart attack and his pride was wounded. "You won. Are you happy now?" Blake looked up at the mirror at his own eyes, no longer a shadow, but a man who had dared to say, "Enough." He answered calm and clear, "I don't want to win. I just want to be respected." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then the line went dead. Blake picked up the box and walked out the door, this time for the last time. No one came to stop him. No one came to say goodbye. And to him, that was the clearest sign things had indeed changed. Blake moved into a small apartment on the outskirts of town. Not spacious, not luxurious, but quiet. For the first time in years, he woke up without a distress call, without a text, asking him to transfer money without having to play the mobile wallet. He worked cooked red by the warm yellow light of the evening. No criticism, no exploitation. Every time he opened the refrigerator and saw something he had bought with his own money, Blake smiled. So freedom was this simple, no unnecessary bills to pay, no breath to take. Tony no longer had control over him. All the yelling, the threats, the manipulation, now just a faint echo in the voicemail, messages Blake never bothered to check. And Emilio. He still hadn't found a job. His motorbike, once a golden child prize, had been repossessed by the bank. The TikTok videos of him showing off his bike were now a faint memory, and the silence inside his cramped bedroom. Blake doesn't feel victorious. He just feels relieved. He doesn't need anyone to lose to him in order to win. He just needs to stop losing to toxic loyalty, losing to a life built on pleasing others. Freedom doesn't come from walking away. It comes from choosing to leave for yourself. Blake isn't a hero. He's just a regular guy, someone who was treated as a backup in the house he grew up in. But he did something few people dare to do. He stood up, took back his worth, and said, "Enough." His story doesn't have a fairy tale ending. It has something more real: freedom. No more hiding pain behind a smile. No more silent sacrifices to please people who never truly valued you. If you've ever been treated like a walking wallet, if you've ever been called invisible in your own family, remember this: you're not alone. And you have the right to stand up just like Blake. You deserve a life you choose, not one where you're forced to live up to someone else's expectations. If you see yourself in this story, leave a comment. Share your experience. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell. There are so many real stories that need to be heard. Family isn't about heartbreak. Choose for yourself.